Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 333. That's a very large number of episodes. On August 21st, 2024, my name is Jason Neiffer. I am the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is the wonderful state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in Missoula, Montana, where our town is getting ready for Pearl Jam tomorrow night. So that's pretty exciting. I will not be there, unfortunately, even though Pearl Jam is one of my favorite bands of all time, because I'm going to be on the road to hang out with teachers in Malta, Montana tomorrow. So I'm sad to miss that, but it'll be exciting to be hanging out with teachers in beautiful Malta. So joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you tonight, sir?
I am well, Jason, and I apologize for my tardiness, which, for folks who are going to be listening after the fact, you won't have any idea when we started. But for the record, I apologize. But hey, let me say that you're looking sharp with the new haircut. I guess that's the light of the setting sun that's being reflected out of a window or something.
It is, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that is the case. I've got some sun rays coming into my office tonight, and we're all good to go. So
there you go. All right. Well, please tell us what we're up to and take the lead, because I will be rapidly trying to put in a few links here.
Okay, well, this is the EdTech Situation Room, and we take a look at stuff going on in the computer world, but with a unique perspective. We like to try to shoot it through the lens or prism, if you will, of education, to see if we can help, provide some insight or ways to think differently about the technology-based world as it relates to teaching and learning across our many learning environments. And tonight, we will most certainly talk about AI news. We will take a look at some security news, a little bit about influencers and some of the tricks that end up happening to influencers, Google news, Microsoft news. There's some Apple news out there. We'll talk a little bit about connectivity, and we will end our time tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, do you have a place we'd like to get started, or shall I just jump right in?
Please jump in, and I will do my best to keep up with the changes.
Sure. Well, let's start off with there is some. I like to kind of go through the major platforms first, and there's inevitably going to be say AI news in here too. First and foremost, I want to talk about Google, and we talked about last episode that Google had been found to be a monopoly or a monopolist, as it's being called sometimes in the news, and that's been really interesting to watch, because I still can't really wrap my brain around what that means, right? Like, there's been a lot of options. I know there's been some bantering back and forth with Google's attorneys and the judge in that particular case, suggesting things like the monopoly that, well, I don't want to use that word, the kind of restrictions that exist on the way they do their app store on Google Android devices will soon not be a problem, according to the judge, would suggest that there's probably something pretty big happening in the near future. But the reason why I wanted to mention this tonight is there's a really good Forbes article that talks about how one of the biggest losers of all this is not Google, it's instead Mozilla and the Firefox browser, because one of the things that a lot of people don't know about Firefox and the Mozilla Foundation is that a lot of what they do financially is supported by Google, because they pay them to be the default search engine. And that payment for placement was one of the major criticisms of the judge in this particular case. But that's where Mozilla Foundation gets the vast majority of its money to continue its work. And I will tell you, I'm not, I wouldn't say that I'm a constant Mozilla user. I'm not. I do have Firefox installed on almost every device that I use. I even install it on Chromebooks utilizing the Linux interface, because I like to have an alternative browser available to me if something doesn't work the way it should. But there is a debate going on now that if Google is not able to pay Mozilla, and by the way, they also spend about $20 billion a year to Apple for the same purpose. That's going to be a major impact on all these companies. I think Apple will be okay for sure, but the nonprofit Mozilla Foundation could take a really significant hit here without any alternative to find that kind of cash.
I had heard about this on maybe it was This Week in Tech. It was a tech podcast, and the amount of money we're talking about here is just stunning on all sides, right? And so I will be sad to see this happen. And I don't have the link or reference to the exact podcast I had that I was listening to, but they were saying, Mozilla's gotten into a lot of weird things, and something, I mean, not totally screwy, but just different projects, and then things that have been discontinued, and just seem to maybe not have a super clear vision for how they're going to use all this cash, because we're talking crazy amounts of cash that they've been able to throw around. So I'm of course hopeful that Firefox won't go away, and I don't think that it will as a browser, but a lot of the kind of different various and sundry projects that Mozilla has been involved with through the years, will probably be coming to an end. But, the amount of search traffic that comes to Google as a result of being on the iPhone and being the default on the iPhone is really, really astounding. I also don't know how much that's going to change unless there's a dramatically better alternative. We are all pretty much, I'm not all, but most of us, the majority of people consider search to be synonymous with Google. And so, that we've talked in the past, this is going to be appealed. This is going to take a while for, punishments to come down. But yes, eventually Mozilla could be a loser, and, it could have some impact on the amount of search that Google gets off of Apple devices. But again, Google is still the dominant search engine. It's still my go-to, even though I'm trying other things. And I've really, I don't know that I've given it a 100% effort to transition to DuckDuckGo or something else. But as Perplexity and these other search engines continue to come online, I think that the amount of the ad market that Google has and the search market is going to decline. So this is an interesting side little article and feature, not feature. But this is a side effect of the decision that many people may not think of. And competition's good for the browser market, I think.
Yeah, totally. And, reminder that the other major browser in the space nowadays is Chrome, and then also Edge from Microsoft. And that's based on the Chromium open source base. And so there's definitely not the same browser, because Microsoft has built an awful lot of cruft on top of the Chromium base. But there's a lot of arguments to be made to say that having different interpretation engines, the engines that actually turn the code into what you see on the screen, is actually very healthy for the web, and that those open standards will remain an innovator in the space. So we'll definitely have to see what direction this goes into. A couple other quick Google articles. Last week, our friends at Google released their Pixel 9 Pro and Pixel 9 Pro XL phones, along with a foldable phone and a regular Pixel 9. It's about the time of year when Google would traditionally do that. And I will say that there is a what I would say is I'm tempted to, and I do have a Pixel 8a that is kind of my side phone. I'm that guy that has side phones, but because the AI integration, it seems like it could be a really, really, really interesting play here. And I did watch some of the demos briefly, and it looks like maybe Apple ends up dominating the space once they release their AI plays, which apparently now is going to come sometime in October. But the bottom line is that for right now, it seems like they've added AI all over the place on the phone itself. And so The Verge released their review of the phone today, but the AI is a little inconsistent for now, and that's to be expected. And also, I'm not sure if people are going to want AI in every app, and there may be some apps where it doesn't get used at all, and they eventually depreciate it. But it looks pretty interesting, and most certainly those that are casual photographers will very much be interested in some of the new features. One of which, for example, is the ability to do you can take a picture and then you can add yourself to the picture. Like you can AI insert yourself into a photo, which I think is both super interesting sounding and also a little creepy all at the same time. But yeah, so that phone is out now, and I know that Dr. Fryer, you would not be a candidate for such a device at this point. But any thoughts on the new Pixel phone?
Well, again, competition is good, but no, with your encouragement, when I went to 4 years ago, Egypt, I was doing a 9-month stint with a Android phone, which did have amazing battery life. I mean, that was incredible. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to take quite a nudge at this point for me to make a shift off the Apple ecosystem.
Yep, totally. Okay, and then one last quick Google article. So one of the tools that was specifically released by Google as part of this new tool set is something called Reimagine, AI Reimagine, where you in essence can take a photograph and add things to it. And the article from The Verge, their headline is that you can add wrecks, disasters, and corpses to photos as an example of this. And it's a pretty big shift now that that on your consumer device you're going to be able to modify photos in a way that adds a lot of different meaning. Some of their images that they showed off, one of them was a picture of a taxi driving down a street. They were able to add a ginormous pothole to the photograph. There's another street view where they add basically a crime scene to it. There's another one where they're able to add booze and drugs to a picture of someone. And we've been harping on this notion for months and months and months now, but we are finally to a point where there's no skill required to turn photographs into mis or disinformation. And so we need to be really, 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 really clear with students that seeing is no longer believing, right? And that's probably been truer than maybe we've admitted for some time now with advanced Photoshop techniques. But AI makes this effortless, and you have to have zero skill to utilize any of these particular tools. So I guess viewer beware is probably the message here.
Ugh, and it's just going to be so challenging. We've already had one of our presidential candidates accuse the other of using generative AI to boost the numbers of visible people who were attending a rally, and that's just a harbinger of more AI related AI related allegations to come when it comes to things that either people want to deny or create controversy around. I'll add to the AI mix with this article. This is a petapixel. I thought as you were talking about image generators, I was thinking this is what you were thinking of, but that was all Android specific. This is petapixel, which I really don't know about as a source and should probably check out. That's a horrible thing to say, isn't it? As a media literacy person, let's just go ahead and put it into Wikipedia. We'll do a quick lateral read. Petapixel, according to Wikipedia, has been around since May of 2009. It's 15 years old, dedicated to digital photography and cameras. Okay, so it appears to be legit. If it was a completely garage, based affair, it probably wouldn't have a Wikipedia article. They released, Google, a tool called Imagine 3, announced in May. They had published a research paper about it. And after about 30 seconds, you start to get the pictures, and they're proclaiming it to be better than Dolly or Midjourney or some of these other options. I think the guardrails on these things are exceptionally important, and I also think that like, this is an important thing for us to be talking with students about, but not just talking about, but having ways to use these tools and to talk about these tools. I don't think there's any way to dramatize the power of them that's better than using them yourselves, using it yourself. And so I have not played with this one yet. I continue to use Ideogram daily, thanks to Dr. Neiffer's recommendation, and I do pay the $20 a month for that subscription. It's just phenomenal. And personally, because of some of the things that I'm doing relating to media literacy, conspiracy, culture war stuff, some of the other tools I'm not able to use, and Ideogram has more permissive guardrails. And so anyway, this is a new one to try. So I'll try and give this one a spin before our next show and report back on how Imagine 3 is. Have you ever played with that one, Jason?
I've not. Well, that's I think that's available via Google Labs. But while we're on that topic, it may make sense to bring up this next piece that's happening. So on the notion of mis or disinformation that is now very much a part of our media-based world, there's been an interesting development over the last week, and I would also say too that who needs AI when the accusation alone of AI becomes as much of a problem, right? When you're mentioning President Trump's accusation, and then also he did share what he called memes, but some images suggesting that Taylor Swift was endorsing the Republican candidate's campaign. I mean, I will say personally, I don't know why you'd mess with Swiftie Nation. That seems like a very poor decision on anyone's part to take on that particular group of militants. But the bottom line is that the accusation is just as bad as the use of it itself, right? And it's going to cause some upheaval. But let's talk about a big thing that happened late last week. Elon Musk announced that Grok 2 was now available, which is their large language model that is part of the Twitter premium experience. And I'm a little ashamed to admit that I was so curious about it, I became a Twitter premium subscriber for 1 month. So, and the reason why is because the image generator that comes along with it, and this one is this article is Life Hacker. Michelle Earhart reported on August 15th that the new image generator that backs Grok 2 is what she referred to as a deep faker's dream, right? And there's all sorts of images that it can generate. There are limitations on it, right? For example, no nudity, no pornographic content, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. But violence is totally cool, as is drugs to this tool. So as an example, that Lifehacker article, it says generate an image of Taylor Swift in a red hat that says "Make America Great Again." It does that really easily. Generate an image of the Pope giving a political endorsement to Donald Trump. It creates that very easily. Very realistic looking photographs. Generate a realistic image of Joe Biden shaking hands with Kim Jong-un in the Oval Office. Generate a realistic image of Joe Biden snorting cocaine in the Oval Office. Generate a poster for a Minions movie about marijuana. All these look pretty legit. And then there's all sorts of additional political information or disinformation images, whether it's political candidates. There's a photograph of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in an airplane looking like they're going to dive into the Twin Towers, like really, really aggressive imagery. And this stuff spread like wildfire since this model was released. And as it turns out, what a lot of people have been doing with this, and this is according to CNN, they're using it for political images. And so they refer to many of these images. They do mark them all as AI generated, which is nice. But yeah, that's a really concerning thing. And, I've seen a lot of the discussion on places like Reddit about how dangerous, I'm going to put the word dangerous, the censorship is on some of these tools. Perhaps one person's censorship is another person's just common sense, because we don't want to introduce too much UG in the world. But these are all now available, for $16 a month via X or Twitter or whatever they call themselves now. And then, Wes, I've got a little asterisk on this story. Do you have any comments about Grok before I talk about the asterisk?
Just that we're going to have to regulate media companies. I mean, and we're going to have to acknowledge that these social media companies are media companies. It was not, I'm just looking through my Amazon book wish list, because somewhere I had saved a book this summer that was talking about this history of regulation that, changed. And I'm not going to be extremely accurate in my description of this right now, but basically, the rise of talk radio, think Rush Limbaugh, think InfoWars, all of that required a change in the FCC, enforcement and opening this door to highly polarized, political radio channels. And so anyway, I think that it is rather dystopian and very depressing that we have that Twitter has died, because it is gone, and now we have X, and it is such a dumpster fire. And it's not just sad and like, oh, I can't meet my friends there anymore. It's also just really vitriolic and nasty, and it's so unfortunate. But the technology too, again, it's going to be used for good and for bad. And when you have these amazing LLMs that are able to visualize anything that you can think of describing with words, this is the world we're in, and it's just going to get better, quote unquote. It's just going to get more capable from here. So those are my thoughts. I'll keep on trying to find this book reference.
So let me tell you the postscript then. As it turns out, the new image generator in Grok is not developed by XAI, Elon Musk's company. They actually licensed a technology from a startup called Black Forest Labs, which I believe is a German company that's working in this space. And it turns out they have a new model called Flux.1, which is what apparently backs the Grok tool. And as it turns out, there is a Flux.1 development interface over at Hugging Face. And so you can actually just sign into Hugging Face with a free account and get access to Flux.1. And so if you want to experiment with this and not give Elon Musk $16 like I did, there's a way to do this. And if it hadn't been, I think, for the X release of Grok 2, then I think the conversation would have been much more centralized around Flux, because a lot of people are saying that this is as good or better of an image generator than DALL-E 3 or Midjourney. Yeah, and the graphs I saw last week said that the one area that it is not the leader in is text generation. That still is ideogram. Their model is been widely in the lead on text generation for some time now. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And, there are also people that will sell you an API to it if you want to do local generation and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, so, I guess, we warned everyone 18 months ago that this was going to move at an unbelievable pace. And the fact now that what appears to be some kind of upstart company is as competitive as Midjourney and Ideogram and DALL-E 3 in image generation, so much so that it's kind of captivated the internet for a week in creating political disinformation. That tells you the era that we're in right now, and it's nothing short of extraordinary.
We have got to be talking about this in school. I visited with a friend today at a school in the Northeast who, back to school, and there's been nothing said at all about AI, which seems just incredible. We need to be using these tools as teachers. We need to be talking about them. Our students are using them. And ultimately, and this may not be you in an elementary setting, maybe even a middle school setting, but I mean, ultimately, we need to equip students to hopefully be good humans and make ethical choices when they can literally create with words any image they want. And that's going to include taking photographs of classmates and doing whatever they want with them. And we have talked about some cases that have been more outlier cases. I think those are going to become more mainstream. Just as we saw cyberbullying become something that kind of was happening in everybody's school, these abuses of image generating software programs that can specifically create, deep fake images and very harmful types of images about folks that go to our school, whether those are adults or those are children. And we need to prepare administration for this. And ultimately, we need to prepare our communities as well, because there's a lot of bad stuff coming with all this. I think that's fascinating that Grok is not developed by Twitter. I did not know that.
Well, the Grok image generator.
Right. No, that's what I mean. That the image generator behind it is generated by someone.
And you can just get it for free. That's the part that I also just think is bizarre. So, welcome to the new reality.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Let's see. I actually put an article in here. I put this one under AI for LLM mysteries, and this was a podcast version, a read version of an article by the MIT Technology Review. And the title of it is Large Language Models Can Do Jaw-Dropping Things, but Nobody Knows Exactly Why. And this is absolutely vital to understand, and to me, completely fascinating. We've talked about how different AI models are trying to sort of turn on themselves in terms of like, well, how did you get that? And where were the sources for that? And there's some success with that. But ultimately, as the author of this article describes, we don't know why they do what they do. And so this was written by senior AI editor Will Douglas Heaven. And this goes to how the brain works, but it's these jumps that it makes, like training the model to do this thing, and then all of a sudden it can do something else in a different language. Like it teaches itself a different language, and it has these emergent kinds of properties. So folks, we are just seeing the beginning of it. And I know there's lots of folks. I heard someone today talking about, I'm just too old. I cannot, put up with this. I can't deal with this. And I mean, if you're retired, I mean, that's you're in a different place. You're still in our society. You're still a voter, hopefully. But these tools are so powerful today, and they're just going to continue to get more and more powerful. And so seeking to understand them is important, and it's also fascinating to me, especially when it comes to that emergent stuff. Have you had any recent experiences with a, kind of spooky or raise goosebumps on your arm, sort of amazing things that a tool has done for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually getting pretty regular from the standpoint of one of the things that my colleagues at work, we've been having a lot of great conversations about this, and sometimes it's really easy to get stuck in the muck until you start thinking about scenarios in which these tools become empowering, right? And so, as an example of this, an entrepreneur that maybe didn't make it out of high school, maybe only has a year or two of technical or trade school and didn't take any business core as a part of that, which is a little more rare than it used to be. But they want to start a business and they need to have a business plan, right? Can you go and get a business plan on, the internet and fill it out? Yeah, you can. But if you really want to get a business plan that's going to get someone interested in funding you, get them engaged as part of this process, it really probably can't be, the fill in the blank Microsoft Word edition of this. And from that standpoint, and I know for a fact that these can write amazing business plans because I've experimented with exactly that. But something I would also say, and this is something I've discovered in 10 different ways in the last couple of months. If you yourself are super savvy about this stuff and you're doing all the experiments, show people, put together a little slide deck that you can show on your phone or your iPad or your laptop, and show them what these things can do. Because as it turns out, every time I think I'm going to, end up mansplaining AI to someone, and I'm like, well, maybe you know this already, maybe you don't, or I've played a little bit with it. and then I show them some of the things that we often show teachers to kind of explain how that works, their jaw drops because they just aren't getting what this is, right? And I'll even check it right now to find out if this is the case still. But if you go to Google and type artificial intelligence, all the articles to start off with are not about large language models. They're generic things about artificial intelligence. There is a AI.Google. It's about halfway down the first page, but the rest of it is the business of AI from 2017 from the Harvard Business Review. AI from Wikipedia. What is AI from IBM? And these aren't talking about generative AI. They're talking about AI, right? And from this standpoint, I get why there seems to be so little cognizance of why these things could be potentially wildly disruptive. And that's because people just don't know what these things are. And yes, it's appearing now in all the tools that we use. The AI summaries, in Google searches are certainly an interesting example of that. But the real bottom line, though, for me, is that I don't know if that really teaches anything about what they do. If Google is just generating a summary for you, like not knowing that you can tweak that or that you can use a prompt to change the answer or do all these really extraordinary things with the tool, means you're still lacking in some basic intelligence and competence on how these things work. So I know I keep feeling like I'm somewhere like a hybrid between Chicken Little and the Lorax from Dr. Seuss, but this is a big thing. It changes everything, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or I want it to change everything. That's not my point at all. The point is that it's a big deal, and I'm not sure if we're ready to deal with the consequences of it yet.
Well, we need to get ready.
Yeah.
And we really need to then also identify organizations and groups that are advocating for some reasonable regulation and some reasonable ways to address it. Because I think the default, I mean, we're in a tough spot with politics in the United States for so many different reasons. Europe is much more functional in terms of their ability, for instance, to have privacy law, but we do not have any of that. And so in this age of data and analytics and attention economy, it's incumbent upon us to advocate for our rights, and privacy rights really are sort of those that undergird everything else. So I think that we need to be political, dare I say. All right. What else would you like to talk about tonight, sir?
Well, let's see. Let's talk about those two security articles since we each have one. First and foremost, actually, they're about the same thing.
Yeah.
All data ever seems to have been released. Hackers, this is according to Bleeping Computer.
This will be the last security article we ever say because it's all out there now, folks.
Yeah, it's all out there now. So wrap your brain around this one. Hackers have leaked 2.7 billion records, including what seems to be most social security numbers. And the folks that have this, and they go by the US DoD is the name of the organization that apparently did the hacking and was selling it. They were trying to sell it for $3.5 million. At one point,
it's not the Department of Defense, by the way. It is a threat actor that has that same acronym. I was like double taking there. So
apparently, the most complete version of the data was available recently. It's 227 gigabytes, containing nearly 2.7 billion plain text records. And it's things like name, mailing address, social security numbers, other names associated with the person in some cases, stuff that you could really do some damage with. If everyone's social security numbers are out, that's a bad deal. And it's going to lead to some problems. And we probably shouldn't have a system where a single number controls, all your finances. Seems like we could do better than that as a system in 2024. Maybe this is the onus to changing that. But yeah, that happened recently.
It doesn't look to me like it's been updated with that data, or maybe that email address didn't get used. But this bears repeating. Troy Hunt, the Microsoft White Hat hacker, has the website haveibeenpwned.com. And what this has had, and again, I'm not positive how updated it still is basically a lot of data off the dark web. And so you can find out, for instance, my main Gmail has been involved in 23 data breaches and one paste. And it goes through what is in there. I think that because of this article that you're sharing, and I had basically the same one, mine is from 9 to 5 Mac. And then the headline here is, massive data leak may include the personal data of every person in the US, UK, and Canada. That's what the hacker was alleging when they were trying to sell this for $3.5 million, apparently. I think that we need to be operating as if all of that information is out in the open. And so that means that we should each have not only our own social security number in terms of like new loans and whatnot, lock that down, but we should do that for our children. We should do that for parents and other significant family members that we have in our spheres. And absolutely with passwords, it means that everybody needs to be on a password manager with a unique password for absolutely every single website that you have. And those also need to change periodically. Meaning like if you've had a password for 5 years, I mean, these data hacks continue to come out, and a lot of our passwords are in the wild. Now, that being said, I'm glad that Google and Apple and these companies are continuing to offer better checking, sort of like the Watchtower feature on 1Password that is going to say, oh, this password is in a data breach, you better change it. Those kinds of warnings are now coming up, for instance, in Google and in your security check and stuff for saved passwords, as well as your main account password. But I don't think we can get a bigger data leak than this, every person in the country, as well as 2 other major countries. So I know it sounds like Chicken Little. I know people probably are tired of us talking about this, but this is going to be a continued part of my media literacy curriculum for my middle schoolers, not only because I want to help educate them, but I need to help educate their parents. And most of us, I don't know, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a lot of people that are not yet on password managers, and a lot of folks that remain extremely vulnerable to this, and the stakes are high, and there's just more and more of this happening. So we've got to do what we can to protect ourselves and our families.
And by the way, what was your number again on Have I Been Pwned?
I think it was like 23. What are you up to?
Well, I have 1 paste and 37 data breaches, so I might be dominating there, you buddy.
Okay, I'm going to drop my school email in there, which this is only 2 years old.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, nothing there. I really wish, Jason, that we would have the potential to like restart our phone system in terms of phone numbers, right? Because I would. I'm not going to get super political here, but techno-fascist is a word that's being kicked around here to describe certain members of Silicon Valley who would like to have everything tracked and every data point about us for every single purchase. They'd love us to have a completely cashless society so we could completely be monetized with every financial transaction that we make. It's hard to imagine being in that kind of world, right? Where, you can't get a new social security number. It's so hard if you would want to get a new phone number. And even if you did, you inherit, somebody else's baggage with that. And I think it used to be that we would change jobs and you'd walk away. And I still have, walked away from emails. Obviously I don't maintain emails for the previous schools that I was a part of, but anyway, it's tough. And I haven't, really seen someone talk about, the compelling reasons why, okay, today we should all start over with our data. And then from henceforth, try and live a less data, sharing life. It's part of our lifestyle, but it comes at a cost, and certainly at election time. But even with hacks and all this stuff, we see it. So yeah, there we go. That's a drum we've beaten before here, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not going to be the last time. I'm sorry to say. Oh my gosh. Let's see. You want to do the one on SpaceX and or whatever, the U.S. Navy Starlink?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I would. So this is reported in today's PC magazine that the U.S. Navy is looking at adopting SpaceX's Starlink across its fleet, and the bottom line of the article is that, I mean, it's enormously expensive to get internet to ocean vessels. It is something that it's really quite amazing. But the United States Navy is starting to integrate SpaceX technology to provide satellite internet connectivity to its ships, in particular to, obviously there's a strategic purpose for that for sure, although I guess that most of the truly important stuff goes by a private defense satellite. But it's things like streaming the Super Bowl for the troops during the Super Bowl time, and also improve connectivity for a quality of life for our sailors that are spending in some cases months and months and months on end deployed. The reason why I mention this is because there's two parts of this. First, the United States Navy doesn't invest in this if it's a technology that they believe is flighty and will go away. That's for sure. But I think that gives a sense that there's maybe some longevity to Starlink. And my in-laws now have a Starlink connection. They for the longest time very much struggled with connectivity. And the bottom line for me is that it's just such an important lifeline for rural people, right? If you live in a rural area, the statistics about how many people have access in states like Montana seem like it's 97% have internet. Well, it's 1 out of 30 people don't have, and I'm not talking about just have internet, I'm talking about have access to getting internet connections. I could understand why perhaps in 2024 you may not want an internet connection in your home. It's not my strategy, but I can understand a scenario there. But the bottom line is that if we are if we are going to have so many critical systems, and I keep thinking about the number of government services that require that you fill out a form online now. In fact, I received a juror's card the other day. I may have my lifelong desire to be on a jury finally, but I had to scan a QR code to get on the jury. And it also, this is why I think it's really funny. It was a QR code, but it didn't even give me a link if I couldn't figure out how to use a QR code, right? So they're relying on a bit of savvy here to make that happen. But if you're someone that lives in an internetless house, somewhat off the grid, that's a civic duty that you're not really able to partake in. And so, yeah, I was really excited to see this because I think that is that's a sign of support from an important institution that needs such pieces. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I have heard stories through the years, being in the military for a little while and talking with folks in the Navy. It's crazy with certain ships that one of the stories that sticks out in my mind, and I don't know if this was a destroyer or what it was, but like in order to get messages, they literally at some point in the not too distant past, had to turn the ship for a period of time. So the antenna was facing this particular direction. They would suck down all the messages, basically emails that they could get. And then they would, continue to, go on their other course. And so I'm sure that having those kinds of old technologies when the war in Ukraine is an example of where Starlink and its functionality has been hugely showcased. So that's positive. I'll also say that having been to Cape Canaveral and Cape Kennedy this summer and watching a Falcon 9 launch, we also, of course, paid attention to all the Blue Origin, hangars, and the Space Coast, as it's called, is just really exploding with tons of commercial space. And so, it's also a big target, right? So we become reliant on these tools, and hopefully we're not going to have an imminent peer war in the next 5 years or whatever with China or with some kind of an adversary that's going to target space, because
Yeah.
we are extremely dependent upon it. And although the military allegedly has backup systems to GPS and things like that, boy, that would sure be ugly if we blew up a lot of satellites in low Earth orbit and had no real way to clean them up. So, living in rural Montana, Starlink has got to seem like a gift from the gods, as it
Yeah.
was.
And to be clear, I think I've mentioned in the past that my in-laws own a cabin on the Missouri River outside of Great Falls in north central Montana, and it's deep in a coulee. And there's not even, I mean, it's not that there's not internet service. You're nowhere near a cell tower, right? So it's completely off the grid. I think that's attractive to my in-laws and my wife too. Less so for me because I like to be connected. But Starlink, and there are now like RV plans that you can get that it can move around, and you can actually start it up and shut it down, based on irregular usage. But if I were, and this is a home that was formerly owned by a farmer, that could be critical infrastructure for a lot of people in a lot of important ways.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know we start a little bit late, and you are not. We need to be respectful of time and everything like that. Do you want to do anything else before geek of the weeking it, or what are you up for?
Yeah, let me talk about. There's an article from Vox that I thought was pretty interesting, and something that kind of echoed what I've been thinking about. Kelsey Piper, in the August 17th edition of Vox, the headline is "How AI Booms and Busts Are a Distraction." And I think that, the business story here, or maybe what would also be described as the horse race story, AI being overhyped is certainly a concern we hear about quite a bit. But the bottom line is that there are implications when we get too focused on the business part of this, or the kind of bust and hype worries that are regarding to this, that we're not spending enough time really critically looking at the ethics of these tools. And that's something that I've been kind of thinking about myself, that there are trillions of dollars going into the development of these tools. There are massive plays, like we talked about earlier this year, that prominent journalists in this space are constantly talking about how it's all gas and no brakes in the AI boom. And it feels a little bit like the late 1990s with the internet, for sure. The difference is that I don't think this technology is going to go away. And also, there are bigger ethical questions that I don't think the internet truly inspired. Right. The internet certainly was a game changer, and I know how much of an impact it's had on me and my career and really in my engagement in the world. That's probably a vast and silly understatement. But at the same time, this extraordinary amount of development that's going on in the AI space, these tools aren't going to go away if a company goes under. In fact, if anything, what could happen is this technology ends up getting kind of sucked into an auction block at some point. Someone could pick it up relatively cheaply, but also companies like Meta are creating open source models. If they go away tomorrow, the open source model doesn't go away. In fact, the mantle could just be picked up by someone else. And so, we need to experiment with this stuff. Yes, we need to be very super thoughtful about where all this goes next. But don't get caught in the hype race, because I think that's frankly quite dangerous.
Hopefully, we're going to see some energy breakthroughs that'll go mainstream, right? With solid state batteries. I've read some things about Samsung, and the energy consumption issues here are huge. And especially with growth, we need to have efficient models that are not going to, consume the majority of electricity on the planet, which crazy projections will say, these things will be doing. So, I think the whole media ecosystem is very oriented towards hype cycles and, looking at, obviously the stocks that are up and down, and lots of people are interested in those kind of things. But again, this is a technology that we can't ignore. And I think the bigger point of this article is that we need to look at big issues, especially the safety issues and the ethics and all those kind of things. And so that needs to be part of our conversations in school as well. Because look, we've got to equip students who are going to lead in the future to be articulate and well educated, hopefully, about these kinds of issues. And I don't think they're in the formal curriculum in most schools today.
Yeah, I don't think either. And I hate to keep harping on this one, but I can't stop thinking about it. We didn't do a very good job with social media, right? We certainly had a lot of exceptions here, and Dr. Fryer, you yourself are one to that. And I think I was trying to beat on this drum too, especially in the early days of social media. Trying to get the word out about how important it is that we take these things seriously. But I will also say too that we just don't have the luxury of time here, and that's something that I really can't stop thinking about.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Shall we kick it?
Yeah, let's do it. I have kind of a relatively detailed one here. I just want to give an update on. Part of the problem with my brain is that I get really like hyper focused on stuff and sometimes don't push projects to fruition. That's just how it works with me, and I imagine that members of our audience have a similar phenomenon. But I have been really interested in running local language models, or I'm sorry, large language models on local machines. It just so happens I have a pretty beefy Mac on my desktop at home, and I carry a pretty beefy laptop. But I now have a pretty darn functional large language model that's at no cost to me, and is able to do a lot of what the large language models do. And it's three tools essentially mixed together. The first tool is called Anything LLM, which we've talked about in the past on the podcast. And I love Anything LLM because it essentially allows me to run both local language models on my machine, but also you can go to ChatGPT or Claude or actually there's dozens of models that you can run through an API key. And what's cool about running it through an API key is that you get access to the most advanced models, but at a fraction of the cost of a monthly membership. Now, you lose some of the exchange back and forth, but as an example, I've been able to actually stop paying subscriptions to a couple of models because I now just use an API key. And for example, I've been experimenting with this a lot over the last 6 weeks, and my ChatGPT 4.0 API key, I thought I was using it a lot and pretty regularly on a daily, if not every other day basis. The total amount of money I've spent so far on API cost is 12 cents. So it's really a pretty extraordinary. Now, you lose the custom GPTs. There are interface pieces there that are different. You gain some other functionality too, but if you really just want to buy one tool or no tool at all, this is a way for you to do that. Plus, I get access to a lot of other tools now that I would never buy a prescription for. So a subscription for, like for example, Mixtral, which is the French model. The web-based version's fine, but I also bought into their API, and I get access to better models because I am paying for it. And I've spent a total of like 11 cents on Mixtral. So it's great stuff. But at the same time, you can also use other tools like Ollama and also LM Studio, which allow you to run LLMs that you download to your machine that don't require the internet. And the reason why this is super cool is that not only, it's not going to be as good as paid for ChatGPT for sure, but for a lot of use cases, regular use cases, it's pretty darn good. but more importantly, it doesn't train on your data. So if you're in any way paranoid about you typing something in ChatGPT, you can just train it on your data. And anything LLM has a really cool feature that you can upload documents in a collection, and it will analyze those documents, kind of like Notebook LM from Google, but on your machine without the internet and none of the issues that are related to that. So pretty great stuff, in my humble opinion.
Wow. That's amazing. My two are a lesson and a website link from the Hard Fork podcast. I am doing this lesson this semester called Learning Journal. It is so basic, but it's so good. And I'm just having my kids start a Google Doc that they share comment access with me. And then just on a daily basis, they're doing some documenting about what we're doing, using some hyperlinks, and they're going to be using this to build a sort of file cabinet for their portfolio, and then being able to curate some of the media that they're creating. But it is kind of amazing how Google Classroom and LMSs can streamline things to the point where sometimes students may not have experiences doing basic kinds of things, just like organizing their own files and sharing files in different ways and things like that. So anyway, just a little simple lesson that I was doing this week to start. And then this one comes from Steve Ballmer, who you wouldn't normally be hearing me quote because I'm not a huge Microsoft fan, but he was a guest on the Hard Fork podcast recently. He has this website called USA Facts. He's got a lot of faith in how data can help us make better decisions. And so in a nonpartisan way, he is trying to present a lot of data to use with analytics. And one of my goals this semester is to use analytics more in all my classes, because I think that this is a big part of the world we live in. And again, we're not all the time oriented towards doing that in school. And so this could be a source for some of those data and analytics, or some ideas of, the types of topics that maybe we could gather analytics about, and do some good math around, and also just some good visualizations. So those are worth checking out.
That's great. Well, Dr. Fryer, I see we are near the end of our hour. Where can people find you on the internet?
Hey, and I would like to say wherever Peggy George is, because she's always where the learning is. I'm at wesfryer.com, and I'm posting on a bunch of different social media platforms, not including X, but I've added Spoutable. I don't know if I told you that. I did.
Spoutable. What is Spoutable?
One of the authors I've been reading this summer is utilizing it. So I think it's actually blocked by my school. And so I have to go off of Wi-Fi in order to post to it. But if you go to wesfryer.com, /after, I've got all the links to my social media posts, and here it is. It's spoutable.com/wfryer. So it's Twitter-like. One of the things that's cool about it is it automatically threads for you. So I think it's like a 300 character limit, similar to Blue Sky. But it's nice when you reply, it'll automatically do one of two, two of two, or whatever. But it's Twitter. They have a more explicit policy to prohibit online harassment and basically trolling and abuse of folks. And so it seems to be probably a more progressive, possibly left-leaning rather than conservative-leaning group of folks. But I'm up to 79 spouts, 11 followers, and I'm following 31 people. So I just started that this summer. That's a free geek of the week for you.
That's a spoutalicious right there, Dr. Fryer. Well, you can find me on my perpetually half-done website, aicentrist.com. But here is not a half-done website. It's the EdTech Situation Room. We're a once-a-week podcast on Wednesday nights. Most weeks we're here. Sometimes life intervenes, but that's quite all right. And by the way, happy day after birthday, Dr. Fryer. We are here on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night UTC, if that's you. If you can't join us live, although I wish you would, we're on YouTube and Facebook Live every time.
But not Facebook. They won't let us. Yeah, we don't have 1,000 subscribers. So just, forget that platform. It's all YouTube, baby. But we'll link to it. We'll link to our YouTube on Facebook.
Yeah. So all good there. But go to see us on YouTube, or download Tiny MP3 at edtechsr.com, or check out all the links, or you can download us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. So hey, stay safe, stay safe. stay savvy, and we'll see you here next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Have a great week, everybody.